Shabbat Shalom, my friends. As I prepared this week's study materials, I politely asked my computer to print out the date, which was April 1, 2023. I don't know about you, but just seeing that date on the paper stirred a feeling of astonishment for me. April 1st, spring is already here. First Sedra is Wednesday evening, April 5th. Wasn't Purim just last week? I guess not. I think I need a nap. This is an enormously important Shabbat. Along with the Sedra TZAV, Leviticus 6:1 and following, and the regular Haftarah from Jeremiah, we have a special Haftarah in which we read from the prophet Malachi. Hinei anochi sholeach lachem et Eliyahu hanavi lifnei bo hayom Adonai HaGadol v'hanora. Behold, Malachi, I am sending you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and awesome day of Adonai. The word great in Hebrew is GADOL. Thus, this Shabbat before Passover is called Shabbat HaGadol, the Great Sabbath. On Shabbat HaGadol, rabbis are expected to deliver extended lectures about all the rules of Passover. Cynics say it is called Shabbat HaGadol because the sermon is very gadol. Others say that when the Egyptians saw that the Israelites were preparing lambs to be sacrificed, it was just then that they realized that the God of Moses had defeated Pharaoh, because one of Egypt's gods was the lamb. Aha! A gadol moment. Some midrashim claim that it was on this day, that the firstborn Egyptians learned that they would all die during the 10th plague. So they initiated a war against Pharaoh, Midrash, hoping to change Egyptian policy and to let the Israelites go free so they could live. They failed and paid the price for Pharaoh's stubbornness. This is Gadol. And one last thing. In traditional congregations, we actually read a part of the Haggadah during Shabbat morning services, beginning with Avadim Hayinu, a kind of rehearsal of what will come Wednesday evening this year. So you see, Shabbat HaGadol is very gadol. One of the brilliant Torah teachers of our day is Rabbi Shai Held. In a magazine sent out this week from the Hadar Institute, which Held serves as president and as dean, Held meditates upon something which in fact is a chidush, a new learning for me. He notes that there are two strands, two profound teachings that are reflected in all that we do for Passover. One teaching, we know this, is that we celebrate the redemption from Egypt. The other is that we are to hold fast to the hope that universal redemption, no matter how long delayed, will come. So Held says, we live in between both teachings. And this is not a comfortable situation. Our world today seems to be so very broken. Our expectations just seem to be regularly shattered, frustrated, or crushed. For Held, our task right now is to allow our celebration of redemption from Egypt to speak to our fears and frustrations about the world in which we now live. Let me try this again. Our task is to allow our celebration of redemption from Egypt to speak to our fears and frustrations about the world in which we now live. Even as despair and hopelessness were once turned into a joyous achievement, so we Jews believe that our world has not run out of redemptions. What was achieved in the past can and will be achieved in the future. What then should be our theme this Passover? Held quoted another teacher who said, "It is all about joy remembered and joy anticipated." Joy remembered and joy, I like it. A dialogue between the past and the future. Now, it's absolutely fascinating to me how the rabbis then set up a second occasion for dialogue this week between our Torah portion and the assigned Haftarah from Jeremiah. Reflecting one of the book of Leviticus's overriding themes, our Sedra speaks in great, even excruciating detail about a variety of required sacrificial offerings. There is the olah, or completely burnt offering, brought to signify submission to God's will. The mincha, or meal offering, which is to be brought from the fruits of human labor. The chatat, a sin offering, an offering to bring atonement for sins inadvertently committed. The asham is an offering to be brought if you are not really certain whether you have committed a sin or not. And then there is zevach shlamim, an offering of thanksgiving, an outpouring of joy and of gratitude. Each type of sacrifice has its unique purpose. Each type of sacrifice has its unique style and rules. Some sacrifices are to be wholly burnt. Some are mainly to provide food for the priest. And some are even intended to provide what I would call a sacred picnic for those who bring that sacrifice. And during any and all of these sacrifices, the altar fire and the ashes that are produced must be tended in a very particular fashion. Okay. And against all of this, the rabbis juxtapose the passionate, anguished words of the prophet Jeremiah. Jeremiah cries out in the name of God that sacrifices are not the apex of God's demands upon us. Far from it. God wants us to walk in God's ways, to embrace God as the source of all existence. Jeremiah. That's why God sent the prophets, to castigate those who saw in the temple ritual the one true path to serving God. In another place, Jeremiah will say, Heichal Adonai, Heichal Adonai, you people just expect the temple of God to fix everything. Far more than sacrificial offerings, God wants the service of our hearts and the service of our acts. Jeremiah, but that's not what we're doing. So what need does God have for temples? What need does God have for sacrificial altars? What does God really want from us? Asked Jeremiah. God wants emunah, faithfulness. God wants kavanah, intentionality, that all that we do profoundly reflects our will and our purposes, so that we don't satisfy ourselves with rote observances. Rote observances are without meaning. God wants kindness from us. God wants justice from us. God wants righteousness from us. The Sedra and the Haftarah must be brought by us into a conversation. Does the Haftarah cancel out the laws of sacrifice? Are the laws of sacrifice strictly performative, in which how we bring our offerings, how we approach the temple of God, how we follow the rules are our top priority? If we observe a letter perfect Yom Kippur, is that what God really wants from us? If we stay apart from the Seder, doesn't matter. It's okay, so long as we act with kindness and justice toward others. Is that what God wants from us? Maybe the Jewish mission in life requires us to live out this conversation, to balance between communal, individual acts of observance and personal intentions, between purity and kavanah. Well, that's it. I hope that we can all find a way to enter into both conversations, between joy remembered and joy anticipated, between structured ritual and the yearnings of our hearts expressed through kavanah. Let me wish you Shabbat Shalom. Let me wish you Chag Samayach. See you next week.